And good evening to everybody, and welcome to this in-concert session in our Music Revival online live stream series. This is Christopher Daigan coming to you from my home in KwaZulu-Natal. This is our live stream number 120, amazingly enough, on Saturday the 15th of May. I'm taking deep breaths. I'm trying to play very calmly because tonight's program is going to be a rather exceptional one. For those of you who've been following our streams regularly, tonight's music is going to be the most dramatic and the most, I would say, concert-type performance music I have played in these streams. In particular, as the program develops, some of the compositions all by Franz Liszt, which I'm playing, and in the last moments I'm playing the Dante Sonata, which is one of the most dramatic pieces I think ever composed for the piano. And I'm not quite sure how it's going to translate and how it's going to work across this live stream medium, but it's a very impressive and exciting piece of music, and it adds a wonderful element that brings all of the facets of Liszt's life together in one continuous whole, which is why I have included it. So I am alone this evening. There are no dogs. They have disappeared. They are hiding in the kitchen, but I'm sure they will appear. Andrew's got the dog spy cam, which we will produce at some point and show you that when they arrive. This evening's music, as I say, devoted to the music of Franz Liszt, the compositions of Franz Liszt in a program called Why Liszt. I had a program which I presented a few weeks ago called Why Chopin, and it seemed like a good follow-up to follow through several composers. So tonight, Why Liszt, and there's a selection of pieces. We're also enabling you to see the whole program at once in the beginning, so you can see more or less what you are playing. I'm going to be hearing what I'm going to be playing. I am going to be playing Liszt's Liebestraum, followed by one of his transcendental etudes, the Harmonie du Soir. After that, I will play the beautiful Sposalizio and the Reminiscence de Lucia de Lammermoor, a fantasy on Donizetti's opera, and then ending the program off, as I said, with the Après un lecture de Dante, or the sonata, the Dante Sonata. Now, I don't want to talk too much. I know this is a concert music-orientated program, but just to recap and tell you a little bit about Liszt again. Liszt, Hungarian-born, is recognized as a very brilliant and young genius pianist at a young age. His father promotes his career and takes him off through Europe and tries to actually eventually admit him, or get him admitted, should I say, to the Paris Conservatoire, when he was rejected, in fact, because he was just too young. He was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time. But Liszt spent much time in Paris, toured through Europe, and as a young man, he promoted his career as a concert pianist, the most brilliant virtuoso. In fact, still to this day, Liszt is probably the ultimate concert virtuoso, concert artist, the most brilliant pianist that ever existed. Difficult to know because we don't have recordings, but he certainly wrote a lot of the most difficult music ever written for the instrument. In his early career, Liszt was inspired, as were all 19th century musicians, by the violin playing of the Italian violinist Nicolai Paganini. Paganini promoted a career whereby he actively sought to accentuate the eccentricities in his life, wearing blue-tinted glasses. He was very pale, very tall, wore very long hair that was not often, apparently not very clean very often, and produced a series of antics on the violin where he would purposely break strings and create effects that people have never heard before. It was audience impressive music, and people were so stunned and so overwhelmed by this that they thought that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for his violinistic ability and talent, which of course was not true. But this was a great inspiration, because then Liszt thought how he could repeat or copy this idea or be inspired by this to create something for the piano, and he set about trying to create a way of piano playing and tricks and incredible facility at the piano that people would listen to him in concert and go, how is that possible? Doing things like repeated notes or octaves. I can't talk and play at the same, octaves together. You know, just really approaching the piano in a completely new way. And great arpeggios and flourishes up and down the piano that made the piano sound like it had 3 or 4 hands playing with an intensity of music making and an intensity of trying to create diabolical, devilish marches of great speed and gallops of speed and fury and hell itself at the piano, and then the next minute being like heaven and the most amorous and beautiful music that was the music of the gods, and that was birdsong and nature itself. So Liszt set about trying to create all these facets, and of course this created an incredible magical career for him. He toured, and I'm always amazed by this, he toured extensively through Europe, right, entire Germany, Italy, France, England, Scotland. He played in Portugal, through Spain. He played in Russia as far as Moscow. He even played in Turkey, where in fact he was arrested because they thought he was an imposter. And it turns out that he had been copied by a sort of an intruder who had called himself something very similar to Liszt and had played a recital in the city a few days before, and everyone had thought this was in fact the real Liszt, whereas where the real Liszt arrived a few days later, they thought he was the intruder and the imposter in the situation. But I mean, an incredible part of the world to cover before the days of rail. How he managed to play this hundreds and hundreds of concerts and then retire from the concert stage at the age of 32 or so. Through all of this, Liszt's ability and desire to create this amazing concert effect, he created the piano recital. He created the idea that someone could play a whole public concert with just a piano by himself. It was a very new idea. Normally it was an orchestra concert with singers and pianists and various components taking place in a public performance, but Liszt said, no, just myself and the piano, I can create a massive public spectacle and entertain an audience just on my own, which is what he did. Throughout his life, he was also fascinated by the religious idea. And this really is a great influence, and I'm understanding more and more how this dominated his thoughts and really influenced a lot of his thinking and a lot of his ideas throughout his life. And the last years of his life, he did take minor orders as a Catholic priest. Now, the music that I'm going to play tonight really brings together all those ideas of impressing an audience. This was music, as I say, that was intended to impress an audience. It was intended to create a spectacle that the audience would say, how is this possible? What am I listening to? How is this humanly possible that this is happening? And the sense of the diabolical, the sense of beyond humanity, the sense of beyond reality in terms of the intensity or the experience of the music. And this is what it was intended. It was intended to overwhelm an audience. Sometimes, and in many cases, Liszt has sort of gets a bad record because some of the music that he was producing was just about that intensity, flash and brilliance, and not much musical substance. But what I'd like to show you tonight is to try and give you an idea of how that musical brilliance and that virtuosity, really what it comes down to, is put to very good musical use and poetic service. I would like to start this evening to play for you one of his most celebrated compositions, the Liebestraum, or Dreams of Love. He composed 3 of these songs extolling various natures of love, and in this particular one, based on the poem by Ferdinand Filigrath, it refers to mortal love and how it is not possible to love enough. And as we're talking of love, we have a whole entourage of loving Dachshunds. Look at this. We have the whole pack has arrived looking at me expectantly. Hello, girls. Am I talking too much? Is that what the problem is? Okay, you're going to have to pop into your basket. I'm going to give you a little squeeze, or you all want to come up. Okay, let me just pick you up. Let me pick you up one by one. Yeah, little Wendy Pop. Hello, Wendy Pop. How are you doing today, Wendy Pop? Yes, Wendy Pop, Wendy Pop, Wendy Pop. Okay, there's Wendy Pop. Wendy Pop, go off into your basket. Here's little Friedy. Hello, Frida. You're also developing a big fan club. Yes, everyone wants to see little Frida. Frida, the Merle Spotty Dachshund. And Lucy's so upset she's running away. Oh no, she comes. Come on, Lucy. Everyone wants to see you. Come, Lucy. Come on, Lucy. Come on, Lucy. You're taking your time. Come. Come. No, she wants to sit there. Okay, well, enough talking and enough of little doggies. They are going to be here for a while. I'm going to dive into the music. Liszt's Liebestraum, number 3, originally a song rewritten for piano as a solo piano piece by Liszt himself. The second piece from a series of etudes called the Etude Transcendental Etudes, pieces of music that Liszt designed, set about to write in such an incredibly difficult way that they transcended perhaps humanity or physicality itself in order to play them. Out of these 12 etudes, I'm going to play number 11, Harmonie du Soir, or Harmonies of the Night. It's not an etude in brilliance and in lots of fast notes, but more an etude in coloration and different sounds and swirling sounds and this very dramatic and powerful climax. For me, it's one of Liszt's most beautiful compositions. It has such an incredible, strong energy to it, and both of these pieces bring about a sense of poetry and a sense of greatness, a sense of real strength, I think, through this idea that the virtuosity, the brilliance at the piano, which is excessive in many cases. You'll hear these flashes in the Liebestraum, like tinkling of glitter from the top of the keyboard, and these very powerful pulsating chords in the Harmonie du Soir. It really stretches the piano and the pianist and the audience to a point of really appreciating and understand a great poetic moment of great substance and power. the 11th of Liszt's 12 transcendental etudes, Harmonie du Soir, Harmony of the Night, a magnificent piece that blends sounds of bells, wafting perfumes, emotions, music that mellifluously trouble, wander together, traverse together, should I say, in such an incredibly, wonderfully exciting and beautifully, intensely rich piece of music. And before that, the Liebestraum, number 3. As I said, both of those pieces, I think, have that element of virtuosity, that incredible power, the wonderful power, but that also goes towards producing that grand effect and giving a real sense of drama in the music. Frida knows about drama in the music, don't you, Fried? Yeah. Frida's the one who always whines. She sometimes, as soon as I sit down to play the piano, she leaves the room. And when I play in the top half of the piano, she whines at me, because I think it finds it very sore on her ears, yeah. And they've been hearing a lot of Liszt for the last 2 or 3 weeks. My piano's already sounding out of tune. I've been practicing a lot, so it's going to sound probably quite bad by the end of the performance. I don't generally practice on this piano. I have another upright piano that I do most of my sort of donkey work on. But I try and keep this in tune for all the performances, and even so I have played on it a little bit, and it's amazing how it's shifted. I'm moving on to 2 pieces of music then. Another 2 ideas where Liszt uses his virtuosity and his understanding of the piano to really bring something magical together. The first is a piece called Sposalizio, inspired by a painting by Raphael of the same name, the artist Raphael, Italian artist. It comes from a set of pieces that Liszt wrote after his years of pilgrimage, he called it, Année de Pèlerinage, and the second volume of Italy. And this is inspired music that he writes inspired by Italian literature, Italian art and sculpture and music. And I'll be playing the Dante Sonata as well at the end, which is part of that set. But in this piece, the opening number, very beautiful piece of music, there's a painting by Raphael, which Andrew is going to bring up on the screen for you. Sposalizio, or Il Sposalizio, the betrothal. This depicts the betrothal of the Virgin Mary and Joseph. That magical moment. And Liszt really treats the subject with great reverence. And I think this is what I keep coming back to, is how Liszt, in these pieces inspired by art and literature and other people's music, really puts to great service his ability as a technician and his ability as a poetic virtuoso. Because this piece of music starts off very gently, Sposalizio, very gently, just with one hand. I started, and someone said, well, I hope you're going to use both hands for the concert, and not just play the whole concert with one hand, when they saw me started playing with this. And it's a very gentle piece. It's hymn-like at times. Sometimes it's very static. But it's almost as though as Liszt grows and allows himself to be immersed in the subject, which he is incredibly inspired by, and produces this reverence for the subject matter, the music grows with great intensity and ends up in these very great octaves and a very powerful climax, a very powerful piece that actually takes you often by surprise. And the second piece of music, Liszt, during his concert years and later, wrote a number of operatic paraphrases or fantasies. In other words, there were no record players or radio station. People couldn't hear music very regularly. And if an opera like Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor was produced, there's a wonderful moment, a sextet, where there are 6 voices and an orchestra playing this wonderful music. And you couldn't just go to iTunes and download the music, or you couldn't just order it or hear it online. You had to wait until you either had a copy somehow of the music or a reduced version for 4 hands at home that you could play. And Liszt realized this was a great opportunity for him to reproduce these moments in his concerts, using other people's music, but reinterpreting and veiling their music in his incredible magical cloak of pianism, you might say. And he treats this, in this case, the music from the opera Donizetti's, the exact section from the opera, with great respect. It's not reworked in any way. It's actually produced pretty accurately, but Liszt still has this wonderful cascading sound around it. It's a very impressive piece, and just shows how, another example of, as I say, how Liszt's virtuosity can be put to forward another person's music to produce something more than just the empty virtuosity that he's sometimes known for. So this is Il Sposalizio from the Année de Pèlerinage and the Reminiscence de Lucia di Lammermoor, the arrangement of Donizetti Sextet by Franz Liszt. Friede, is that hurting your ears? Sure. Well, I did tell you this was dramatic music. I mean, this is really the most complex and dramatic program I've played in the last 120 live streams, I can assure you. I hope it's traveling across. I hope you've got the volume turned up full and that the full effect of the piano and the sound and the waves of sound were coming across. And that was the Reminiscence de Lucia de l'Amour, the reminiscences or fantasy around that famous passage from the opera Lucia by Donizetti. And before that, I played the opening piece of the Anne de Perenage 2, Sposalizio, inspired by a painting of the same title by the Italian artist Raphael. Now, in that set of Italian-inspired music, Liszt ends off with a fantastic and great extended piece of music, the most extended and dramatic piece I'm going to play tonight, even more than what you heard. And this is known as the Dante Sonata, or Après une lettre de Dante, after a reading of Dante's Divine Comedy. This extended poem, Liszt brings together, is inspired by Dante's idea of the depiction of the inferno, of hell, of purgatory, heaven itself. And Liszt combines here his brilliant piano playing, his imaginative piano playing, and creating these textures and these musical ideas, but within also his religious preoccupation, you might say, and really depicts, I think, a very graphic sense. I mean, you really get the sense of the turbulence of the inferno, of hell itself, moving forward to the grand passages of heaven, just at first glimpse from far away, and then arriving in this grand opening sense of intensity and love and divine redemption, the final love theme. And of course, Liszt, in his understanding of the original poem, apparently, the melodies and the themes which he use Liszt's compositional style known as thematic transformation, where in fact he takes one melody and transforms it again and again and again. And so in fact, the opposites of the Inferno and Paradise itself are in fact internally related through a musical identity, a common musical identity. Just to show you, for instance, Purgatory itself is in a bigger form. The depiction of heaven sometimes very dramatic and loud, and other times very quietly and shimmering. And the final theme, the transition, the theme of love. I can think of what it is now. Which is a transformation of sense, in a very dramatic way that Liszt actually writes it. So these two opposing concepts are actually intrinsically the same idea, two opposite sides of the same idea. The Dante Sonata, as it's known, because it has this enormous structural combination, 20-minute piece, is really one of the most dramatic pieces of music that Liszt ever wrote, and I think for the piano itself. It really needs it to be in a big concert hall on a big piano to really gain its full effect. And the other interesting idea, the musical idea that you'll hear repeatedly right in the opening, this interval that Liszt uses, an augmented fourth known as the devil in music, because it's such an unusual sound, as opposed to most music is made up of fifths and octaves. That's an augmented fourth. And Liszt uses these augmented fourths and these patterns of augmented fourths going down the keyboard repeatedly, but then transforms them from that to that open fifth, depicting the sense of release and divine love that embraces the central idea of this piece. So this is the Dante Sonata, or the official title, Après une lettre de Dante, the sonata quasi una fantasia, a sonata as a fantasy, very dramatic piece by Franz Liszt. Frieda's still here. That was Liszt Dante Sonata, Sonata quasi una fantasia, après un letto di Dante, from the second volume of the Years of Pilgrimage, Italy, bringing an end to our program tonight. You'll see in that piece, I think you'll see the point that I'm making, that Liszt was capable of incredible brilliance, drama, thundering atmospheres, so many really spellbinding moments. I mean, an audience hearing that music for the first time must have been really completely puzzled and overwhelmed. But yet it's good, it's put to good poetic use, it's with good poetic intention. Brings us to an end of this evening's program. Thank you to Andrew for the technical support. I hope you've enjoyed the selection of music. Only leaves me to see who's here. Is Lucy going to come and say hello? Come on, Lucy. Everyone wants to say, come on. Everyone wants to say hello, Lucy. Yes, Frida, I'm going to see you now. Now, Lucy. Oh. Everyone loves little Lucy. Here's little Lucy, the long-haired dachshund. Lucy, what did you think of the Dante Sonata? You prefer the B minor sonata instead. The other Liszt sonata is your favorite. Okay. You think it's too noisy. It's just very noisy. It's very noisy in such a small room, especially when you're sitting under the piano, Luce. It's very noisy. Liszt Dante Sonata, yes, it's a very noisy piece. Yes, you would like to play it one day. You think you're going to have piano lessons, and then we're going to have little doggy piano. You got some work to do in your octaves, Luce. That's going to be a tricky one. Hey. And what else have you been doing today? Nothing. Just nothing. Just sitting in the beautiful sun. Yes. And Frida, here comes Frida. Come on, Frida, you want to go and sit there again? There we go, Frida. Look who's there. Here's the special Friedel pop. You're such a special little girl. Look at that. Friedel pop. Oh, you're a special one. Yes, you want to give it a look-see. Wasn't too noisy for you, was it? No, it was fine. Okay. Right, well, that does bring, gosh, I'm really working up a sweat now. It's quite warm in here suddenly with all that noise. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Hope you've enjoyed the selection of Liszt's music. Join me again on Wednesday for another lighter, easygoing selection for Piano Hour, and next Saturday for some standard, very popular classical repertoire in our in-concert sessions. Look after yourselves, have a good evening, and stay well. Oh, you can have a little shout-out. Yes, we've got to have a shout-out, that's right. I said we've got to have a shout-out. Frida's got to have a shout-out to M. Little M in St. Patrick's Road, along with Margot and Warren and Jess. We've got to shout out because they've been watching and they're always looking for little Frida and little Lucy. Hope you guys are watching. Hope you're all there. Little Luce and Frida's making their appearance. And I'm going to play out with some music if they can hear anything after that.